Thanks for tuning in to the Mission Matters podcast, where we feature successful, mission-driven leaders committed to creating a positive change in the world. Our mission with this channel is to inspire other leaders by providing industry insights, new ideas, and inspiring stories from the pros.
All right, Paul Feith here, host of the show where I talk with leaders heading up mission-focused organizations, leading from the heart, inspiring others, including myself, and making a difference in our communities. I know I always say this, but I really am excited about today's guest. She is developing and retaining women leaders, and I can't think of a better mission than that. I'm one of those few people who, when my wife got pregnant and said, "Are you hoping for a boy or girl?" I was always hoping for a girl. So I grew up in a family of boys, and I always wanted a girl. So I have two girls, and they are leaders in their own rights, 25 and 27 soon to be. So who I have here with me today is Rebecca Malotke-Meslin. She develops and retains women leaders. That's our topic for today. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat.
Yeah, me too. And I'll just give this blurb out here. You know, you're a women's leadership coach and speaker. You help women in schools and nonprofits, independent schools, to lead more confidently and authentically and I love this word because it's like 7 syllables, unapologetically. And you're the founder of Pleasantly Aggressive. I also love that name for a business as well. It's like, take no prisoners kind of a thing. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about Pleasantly Aggressive. Where does that name come from and what's that about?
So Pleasantly Aggressive, it encompasses a couple of different things. First and foremost, you already mentioned in my little blurb, the word unapologetic. But the other word that I really lean into is authentic. And I think Pleasantly Aggressive actually describes my authentic leadership style. The phrase was coined by a former boss of mine. So I was working at an independent school, and my boss was going to be leaving. He had announced his resignation. He was going to be leaving at the end of the school year. And so while we were working together, he was my mentor. And I thought, as he's exiting, this is a great time to ask for some feedback. He's leaving. He's going to be really honest with me. So I'm going to ask some hard questions. And one of those questions was, I'm looking to move up in leadership. I'd like to be a head of school someday. Do you think I have what it takes to be a head of school? And his response was, yes. You're pleasantly aggressive. And he meant it as a compliment. And I absolutely took it as a compliment. It really, truly described my style, my personality, but my style of leadership. And it always stuck with me. And it's just so interesting because, from a marketing perspective, let's say, like these two words aren't frequently used together, and yet they're completely familiar to anybody who hears them. Yeah. And what was also interesting is that it was not taken on website, social media. I have all the handles. I have all.
Wow.
I know, right?
Because usually 2 words in any combination are pretty much gone.
And if you Google it, there's a couple of because I've done this lots. There's a couple of articles that come up where somebody used it to describe something, but it was free and clear and all spaces. And so I snagged it. It felt like a sign, that it was meant to be. And that's so it stuck and that's who I am.
Well, I like Pleasantly Aggressive. And to me, it means assertive, right? You can be assertive and not rude. Right. But assertive is not a great company name, and it's not a great alliteration either. So I love how those 2 words play off of each other. So you created a company based on that name then. And like you said, you've got the domain name, the handles,
all the things. Yeah.
All the things. Yes.
And it was interesting because it came together, pretty much at the same time that I was developing the business. I think I may have come up with the name. Obviously, it was a phrase that I had in my mind. But starting a coaching and a consulting business, for the most part, people are using, would use Rebecca Malotke-Meslin Consulting or Rebecca Malotke-Meslin Coaching. Sure. That felt like a little bit of a mouthful. And also, I just never do things in a traditional way. I always feel like I have to be a little bit different, a little bit unique. But my mission of my organization was kind of developing around who do I want to serve, and how do I want to support them, right? And I kept coming back to, I'm supporting women leaders, and I'm trying to support them so that they can be authentic. in whatever leadership style that they have, right? Identifying, finding clarity around their leadership style, and then leaning into it and being authentic, not feeling like they have to show up in some other way in order to be successful. And so what better representation of that than me saying, well, this is who I am authentically, so I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to name my business this thing that feels authentic to me and set the example, right? And and I think it was just it also helped ground me, right? So that it inherently in it is my mission, right? For myself. And as I started to develop programming and thinking about, again, serving my clients and what they need, I was able to kind of center myself and that idea of what it means for me to be pleasantly aggressive and how I can show up for my clients.
And talking about all the things, especially lining up, I don't know the exact statistic, so you may even know this more than I do. The percentage of women leaders in nonprofit organizations is something like north of 85%, isn't it?
That's actually, I don't know the statistic either, but that sounds very accurate. Yeah. What's also interesting, though, is that if you're looking at independent schools, which is where the industry that I came out of before I started my own business, 75% of employees, you think of teachers, 75% of employees are women, but only 35% of heads of school are women.
Okay.
Which is really interesting because if let's say the statistic you just gave is correct, that nonprofits, which we don't think of independent schools as nonprofits, but they very much are, right? It's very topsy-turvy. Like we're female dominated in terms of our staff, and yet we're not the ones that are leading most of our schools.
Not so much in leadership. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But back to your point that yes, what I do see in terms of executive directors of a lot of nonprofits are very high numbers of women leading those nonprofits, coming up through the ranks and then taking over.
And that's your business, right? You're coaching these women through sustainable leadership. And so I'm just dying to know what that looks like. What does a day in the life look like of a coaching session? And what are the common challenges that you hear a lot of from a lot of these women leaders?
I say I work with early and mid-career, but I will say I also work with executive directors. So really all levels of leadership. And what's fascinating is some of the same themes come through regardless of how early in your career you are or how senior you are. And I think we're constantly learning new ways to lead as our workforce changes, as our industries change. Your leadership is not stagnant, right? It has to be ever evolving. But some of the challenges that I see for women seem to be consistent. And I'll bring up a couple of things that I feel like not only are topics that I talk about in terms of giving workshops and giving seminars on, but also come up in a lot of client coaching calls. So one of the things I talk about a lot is delegation. And it doesn't seem like an inherently, female focused or woman centered concept, but there's a lot of research around the fact that women are much poorer at delegating than men. And in terms of business, if you are holding on to too much in terms of your role and you're not delegating effectively, most likely you're going to struggle to meet your goals and then essentially not find success. And so getting to the root of why delegation is problematic for women, and a lot of it is around mindset issues. A lot of women are afraid to ask for help. They're afraid that it'll look like they don't know what they're doing. And so they hoard work. A lot of times it actually has to do with empathy. They're afraid that they're going to burden their employees too much. They already see they're working really hard. They don't want to put upon, right, the folks around them who already are working so hard. And they feel like, well, I'd rather take this on and be burdened by it than, force my employees to be. Right. And so some of these mindset issues are what I work through with my clients. And I have a great workshop that I do that really the idea is to just build your self-awareness around why aren't you delegating more? And then for some women, they're like, I know that I need to, but they don't have a good strategy. So for them, then we also then move into this idea of, okay, what is your strategy around delegation? And do you have a plan? Because most people's plan around delegation is, I'm in a place where suddenly I am like overwhelmed. I can't get enough done. I'm working too many hours. And then they just take something on their plate and just kind of hand it off to somebody else. No strategy, no plan. And then it goes poorly. And then what do they tell themselves? Never doing that again.
Yep.
never doing that again. That was bad. This is why I don't delegate. They just got like confirmation bias, right? That like, this is why I don't do that.
It's not going to be done the way they wanted it done. Yeah. Because there was no strategy behind it.
Yeah. We have perfectionism issues. We have people pleasing issues. Like a lot of these things I see with really high achieving, really smart women come up, and they just need somebody to talk through it with them and to hold them accountable. I mean, I am an accountability partner for them too, to say, okay, you tried delegating something. You used a plan. How did it go? Right. And walking through, okay, it didn't go perfectly. That's okay. What did we learn from this? What can we apply next time? And right, having a little bit of a long-term relationship with folks so that they don't feel like they're being reprimanded, right? But that they feel like they have a partner to brainstorm through and problem solve what went sideways, and also celebrate when it went really well, right? Like it did work effectively. And like, this motivates me to do it again. So still reflecting on what went right. And also like, okay, now I have motivation to do this again. And then really evaluating like, what did this free you up to do in terms of time? Like you got those things off your plate. Did it just give you breathing room? Because that's okay too.
Yeah.
Like you might just need to
balance. Yep.
Right. Like, oh, you got to your kid's soccer game on time. That's a win.
Yep.
Right. Like that is winning all day long. You got to do something that you weren't able to do previously because you delegated something.
That is a big one. I mean,
are you thinking about what you need to delegate right now, Paul?
Yeah, no, actually, I think I've done a good job of that.
Good.
2 years ago, we hired a dedicated account manager to handle all the client touch points, and that's been a lifesaver. So shout out to Dot and Company for that. But I see it because 95% of our clients are nonprofits, and I see the delegation conundrum. What I didn't realize, and what I just learned today, is the mindset that is preventing that from happening. Especially the empathy piece and not wanting to look like they don't know what they're doing or they need help, right? Because that's not something a guy would think, right? But it might be something that a woman would think. So it's a very generic, not a generic, it's a very gender specific feeling, I think, that I had not considered. And there are some nonprofits out there that just don't have anybody to delegate to, right? They're small one person operations, and there's no reason why they can't delegate to their board. Boards should be working boards, right? Not just advisory.
Well, and when I'm talking to nonprofit clients too, one of the things that we discuss is if you are a shop of one, an office of one, sometimes delegating isn't to a person. It's to a consultant, right? You are the reason, right? You are somebody's delegating to. They're hiring you
exactly.
to do a task, right? But it's simple as like I use, you and I use software to schedule this call.
Yep.
We delegated to a system, to a software. And so helping people also think outside the box about what delegation is and how you can get really creative with it to, again, free you up to do what you're here to do, right? To do what only you can do.
Well, maybe share with them the tools that are out there or that are available as well.
Yeah.
Like
absolutely.
Tools.
Yeah. I mean, Calendly is like, I have an assistant. Like I use Calendly to book all my calls with clients. And it really is like, I mean, don't tell Calendly this, but like they don't charge me very much money. And I would pay a lot more for that service because it frees up so much of my time to do the work.
Make a note to my editor to delete this section. Yeah. Yes, you're right. And Google just came out with a very similar service.
Yes.
They built it to their thing, but they don't have the buffer time worked out really well yet. So
good to know.
Calendly is still but I digress. So delegation. Okay. Anything else that's a big challenge for nonprofit leaders?
Negotiating.
Mm-hmm.
And I couch this under not just negotiating, but asking for what you need. There's a lot of folks out there, and again, women in particular that I'm mostly speaking with, who are, again, can be very humble at times. Also, when we're talking about like executive directors of nonprofits, they know intimately what their budget looks like, right?
Sure.
And because of that, if they think they want, okay, let's just say, for instance, they want to hire you for marketing services, but they're looking at their budget and they're making a lot of assumptions that, well, I don't know if they're going to approve this because it's a lot of, it's an investment. It's some money that we maybe didn't budget for, but I'm starting to see the need for this. And before they even make the request, they've talked themselves out of it. They have essentially told themselves no before they've given the decision maker a chance to say no. And so we walk through that process, and one could call it limiting beliefs, but really I walk women through this process of thinking about, what do you need to be successful in your role? Like, first you have to identify that. Because if you're not meeting your goals, there's something getting in the way, and it there's not always a dollar amount attached to it, but a lot of times there is. Like, I need to hire more staff. I need to hire a firm. I need more money. Like, if I'm going to keep doing this job, I need a higher salary. I need a competitive salary, right? And walking through this process of understanding, what do I need to be successful? Knowing that sometimes there's a dollar amount attached to it, and then making a really compelling argument for how giving me these resources is going to help this organization meet its goals and be successful. And what it does is it takes it away from a woman feeling selfish, asking for resources, and makes it about the organization, and makes it about sustainability. It makes it about success, makes it about meeting their strategic goals. And so again, mindset shift. It's not about you. It's about your organization.
Yes.
And when you're putting that argument together, I help women do that. I help them put that argument together. And then we also hopefully have time, like when I do this in a workshop style, what I like to do is have the time to also do a little role playing around then making the actual ask of it. And that back and forth of negotiating, which
you were so right on that. It's almost there's a crossover segment that we did about social enterprise versus where you have a budget and you develop programs around that budget. But a better approach is the social enterprise model, where you say, here are your goals, which you were just talking about. Here are your goals that you want to accomplish. How are we going to fund it?
Yes,
figure
absolutely.
that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And the negotiating part, you can't really have that conversation until you have the conversation around, why are you asking for this?
Exactly.
Like, you have to be really clear. And if you can't convince yourself that you need it, you sure as heck aren't going to convince anybody else. So asking some of those key questions, getting really clear on what you need. And even that, like, sometimes people think that they need another employee, and that might very well be the case. But sometimes when you do that deep dive, you realize, like, actually, that's not what I need. We actually have enough staff. Actually, what I need to do is fire somebody because they're not carrying their weight, and we need to reposition. I mean, it's just a really interesting exercise. And again, some people need that support. Others need help with the actual conversation, right? They go into a negotiation, and again, they quickly negotiate themselves down, as opposed to letting the other person. And anybody who's in like fundraising or development, or they've been in these conversations. But you as a business owner, right? Like, you propose a price tag that's associated with something. This conversation applies in so many situations, but when you lay that number on the table, right? And I have a slide that literally just says, prepare, ask, shut up. Stop talking after you've made your request. Stop talking. Let them respond. And I stress, this is an act of empathy. Why? Because I'm allowing this person a moment to process the information I just requested of them. Like, they need a beat, right? They need a beat. So have some empathy, have some grace, let them process it, but don't fill the silence. Don't negotiate yourself down by going, well, if that doesn't work, maybe.
Oh, no, don't. Yeah. Some of the best actions and decisions are made in the moments of silence.
Yes.
And letting the other person, even if you're hanging on for 15, 20 seconds, waiting for that first word to come out, it is so powerful.
Oh my gosh.
And I didn't learn that until late in life, but.
Well, and Paul, that's exactly my point. Like, a lot of women are never taught how to negotiate their salaries. I mean, and that's a big topic in and of itself. So if that seems scary to folks, I often do focus on, like, what are some small things that even those things you're hesitant to ask for and negotiate for. And, like, let's start there. But so many of them have never had somebody hold their hand and have this conversation with them and let them know, like, you're not selfish. You're not greedy. You're not, like, don't make it into something it's not. But I get that that's how you feel. Right. And that's where coaching is so powerful is to say, like, I understand. I know exactly how you feel. And there's so many women who feel this way. It's not your fault. It's not your fault that you were never taught this. But that also doesn't mean that you can't take control of what's happening right now and learn a new habit, right? Unlearn a bad habit, learn a new habit. You have that power. So let's go. Let's do that.
The takeaway here, everyone, is this is so much easier with a coach. Like, all of this would be so much easier, to just run the negotiation, learn how to negotiate, learn how to, include silence into your conversations. And I know with our business, it's pretty standard. We'll give a price for something, and it's usually a 1 year conversation because they don't have the budget for it, but they have to get the budget. So it ends up getting usually writing a grant for it. So usually it's a year later that they say, hey, we got the grant and we've got the money. And that's pretty much our sales cycle. It's a 1 year sales cycle.
Yeah.
But there is a negotiation element in that too. So if we give a price and they're like, well, maybe our grant will go up to maybe a certain ceiling, then we will work with them with whatever budget they have. We may have to take some things away, or maybe we even add things. I don't know. But negotiation is certainly an expected portion of any kind of a project because they're representing the organization,
mm-hmm.
and they have to have a financial stewardship,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
and a financial responsibility.
When I think about nonprofits, schools, for instance, some of our leadership came up from the classroom. They don't have business degrees, and yet we expect them to have that kind of business acumen. And the same thing can be said for other nonprofits, depending on the populations that they're serving. But they may have started off, a lot of women start off in staffing positions, doing, direct services to clients, and maybe don't have that kind of business acumen. And yet somehow, because they're smart, because they're capable, because they kill it at the job that they have, we promote them. And then we don't backfill those leadership skills. We just kind of expect them to learn on the job. And I mean, that does happen for some folks, right? But sometimes you're 10 years into your career and then you're like, oh my gosh, I wish somebody had taught me this in my first year as a leader. And that's some of the gap that I'm trying to bridge, right? Is like, how can we get these skills in the hands of women leaders earlier in their careers so that they're not burning out?
Yeah.
So that they're not overwhelmed, so that they can spend time with their families or whatever other priority outside of work that they have.
And using the time they already have to be more productive.
Yes.
And reach those goals as opposed to just spinning their wheels, which you see a lot of. And that's just because there's so much work to be done, right? And some of it can be prioritized for sure. So I think that's where the coaching model really helps. And you've been doing this for a number of years. And I got to imagine, I would believe that, anybody doing coaching would just in perpetuity, right? That's my philosophy, because why wouldn't you? But there's got to be some that sort of have learned what they needed to learn and drop off. I got to imagine you've had some really nice success stories with, and I'm just wondering, especially for the benefit of a nonprofit leader out there, what does success look like to you when you set them free? And does that look like a better work-life balance? Does that look like they're finally able to do the things that they've always wanted to do? What does that look like for you?
I think for a lot of my clients, whether they say it or not, there's always this element of trying to find clarity. And sometimes that's getting clear about what a work-life balance looks like for them. Sometimes it's getting clear on their roles and responsibilities. Like, what is my job? What is not my job? What, like, I've taken on too much. How do I decipher between what I need to be doing, and to your point a minute ago, and what I don't need to be doing? And so when, I'm kind of closing out the time I have with a client and we're on, getting close to those last few calls, sometimes I don't want to create dependency. I'm trying to create strategies and tools that they will continue to use into the future so that they don't need me. But like anything, like therapy or coaching, like sometimes you do need that ongoing support, especially when the environment you're in presents a lot of challenges. But to me, success looks like my client saying, I have the tools that I need, and I feel like I can navigate new challenges as they come my way because I have these tools. And also, like, I had fun along the way. Like, I know most coaches probably wouldn't say that, but like for women leaders, I want them to grow and learn in a space that also is joyful Because if they can associate growth and learning with joy, and that happens once a month on a 60-minute call with me, they will be more likely to seek help and coaching in the future. So if I hear from them that like, this was a really positive experience and I had fun and it was so great to get to know you. And also I learned a lot and I feel like I can shepherd myself in this next phase, like I'm over the moon. And if they come back to me at some point because they're facing a new challenge, I'm like thrilled that I get to work with them again. And if they never call me again, or they need a different kind of coach in the future, I hope they'll still reach out and say like, hey, I'm in a different phase now and I'm looking for something different in terms of coaching. Because that's also something that people should be free to do and should know that like, that's okay. It's not like switching hairdressers. Hairdressers, like it's really hard to let go of. Like if you know this thing
Right.
from women, like
Yeah.
coaches, like, yes, move on to the next coach that meets your needs. I really hope that.
You really hope that.
I really hope that you continue to seek growth in whatever way is most meaningful for you. And I also hope I'm instilling that in them. Like this will continue to be an ongoing process for you. And for some women, it means, seeking therapy because I'm not a therapist. Although sometimes people do ask me, is this like work therapy? Like, is that what this is?
Yeah.
Like, I am not a licensed therapist. I do not do therapy. But because of the reflective aspect of coaching, a lot of times they'll realize like, oh, I could see how something similar like going to therapy could be really beneficial to my personal growth. So it just unlocks so many different things for my clients. And I love to see it all and all of it. I think whatever their journey is, when I get to hear how that journey is, where that's taking them into the future, I feel like that in and of itself is success.
Nice. Certainly a service that's needed in this industry. And Rebecca, I have to ask you, because I know you have your own podcast and you unpack some of these issues. Can you let us know where we can find that podcast?
So I co-host a podcast called Confidently You, Women in Leadership. It's available only on Apple Podcasts, and we've been doing it for about 2 years. It is a podcast dedicated to women leaders in independent schools. So we interview women who are leading both as heads of school and in other high-level positions. I will say, caveat, it is for independent school leaders, but so many of the topics are applicable to really, any nonprofit and a lot of other industries. Our goal with the podcast is to lift up the voices of women leaders. So both to show you their journey to leadership so that, the idea of if you see it, you can be it, seeing their past, seeing their journey, hopefully seeing yourself in some of these conversations, as well as, giving some really clear goals for women to think about and also strategies. So for instance, we did a 2-part series on the search process. So if you are an executive or looking to become a high-level executive and have never been into like a search, right? Like gone through a search firm to look for a position, this can be very intimidating. So we did a 2-part series with 2 search consultants where we demystified the whole process and we just broke it down. So anything we can do to help women leaders answer questions that maybe they're afraid to ask or don't even know they need to ask, while also just showcasing the amazing work that some of these women are doing in their organizations.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. Well, I'll be sure to link your website and also the podcast link for Apple Podcasts on the landing page.
Awesome.
This has been a great conversation. I've learned so much. And especially, I'm still going back to that whole like mindset of like the empathy and some of the gender biases that are there to prevent people from either negotiating or what was the first point we made here?
Delegating.
Delegating. Yeah, that's a big one, actually. I mean, I'm just swirling in my head all the executive directors I know that have challenges with that, and maybe they're referrals for you. We'll see about that. Any parting thoughts for our listeners out there?
One of the things I always like to share is that we're talking about women leaders, and a lot of times women don't even see themselves as leaders, or they're waiting for a title to be considered a leader. And because I work with early career women leaders, I often tell them like, it's not a job title. It is a mindset. And there's so many opportunities to lead that don't come with a title. And recognizing early on that you have leadership capacity and that anybody can be a leader, I think is such a great space to get your head into early in your career, to think of yourself as a leader and look for the ways in which you are leading. Because then when opportunities to develop those leadership skills come up, you'll know how to identify them. You will see them clearly. But if you don't see yourself as a leader, and then you see that job posting or you see that opportunity or that webinar that's focused on women leaders, you'll see it and go, oh, well, that's not me. I'm not one of those. And you could miss the opportunity to really develop some of those skills. So just know that leadership is a mindset and not a job title.
Good food for thought, for sure. Well, thanks for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. I like I said, I learned a lot today.
Thanks for the great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Until next time, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Matters podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.